Welcome to my channel, Julie Schatz Music. Today we are in the studio working on a Bryson Tiller / LMA trap soul type beat, specifically using Splice. If you haven't used Splice before, Splice is a great producer platform with an array of samples, one-shots, loops of all types, all different genres. We're going to be using a vocal sample that I got from Splice today to create our Bryson Tiller type beat. I'm going to show you my process to doing that in Logic. Before we get started though, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I've got more tutorials coming. I've got beats, performances, original music, sample packs, and so much more. So stay tuned for that, and now let's get into it. So here is my Logic session. This is the original file for the vocal sample that I dragged in. Splice, you can find sounds on the website through your browser, and you can save sounds that you like there before even downloading it. You can also use the app, which is what I do, to drag my sounds that I've downloaded right into my DAW. You can search for new samples in here as well. So when I dragged this sample in here, you can see this is the BPM here, 150. And we're at 72 now, so we've got it half time from there. It's not that far off, but it's not exactly in time. What you can do to start with, just to make this fit into your tempo, is click on the flex time here and simply move your cursor toward the end of the region, and you can see if you're at the middle of the region, this is just allowing you to stretch the sample as you'd like. If you're at the top, it gives you a different option, and this is the flex mode to allow you to drag it to the tempo that you need. So you can see how the sample is changing, and I dragged it to meet up exactly at the end of the second bar here. So let's listen to what this sample sounds like by itself. So that is the sample that I dragged in its original form. Now, to create a new track that you can use a sample with in terms of creating different MIDI notes to your liking and chopping up the sample, you can simply left click on your mouse, hit Option, and you'll drag this. Originally I didn't have these other tracks here below that sample, but you drag it into a new track and it'll give you these different options. The best is to drag it to Quick Sampler Optimized. So that's what I've done. And this is the track that I worked in for the Q sampler. Now, a couple of things. You can click Slice here and you have your different markers. And the other thing that is the easiest way for most samples to chop up is by clicking beat divisions. And you can choose how many divisions you'd like. In this case, I did choose 1, and I changed this a little bit so one of the samples is a little bit longer, which you can simply do by clicking on one of these markers. As far as the MIDI notes, you can pick your start key however you'd like it, however it's more comfortable to you. It normally defaults to C1. That was a little low. I have a couple different octaves on my keyboard, so I've changed this to C3. Another thing that's important is you want to change your polyphony to mono. It's going to be defaulted to 16, and normally you don't need that kind of polyphony. It is going to muddy up the sample when you're chopping it up and playing the different notes. The mono will allow the next MIDI note that you play of the sample to cut off the previous one. So those are some helpful settings to just start with when you're working with the sample. And you can see here, these are the notes that I've chosen to create how I want the sample to sound like chopped up. And once I did that, I simply clicked on my region here and bounced in place to an audio track. And this is the audio track, so we're going to mute this, and this is the original sample. And what I've done here is some automation to make it sound a little bit more interesting, because I've used this chopped up sample part as my intro. So let's hear what that sounds like with the automation, and then I'll go through some of the parameters. if you click A on your keyboard, it will bring up the automation. Now this is the volume automation. What I started with, and what's great about the automation here, is you can automate whatever you'd like. So I automated 2 different effects. You can see down here in the mix window, I've got a delay and a filter. So that's what I've automated to begin with. So you can pick the different options here. I've got the filter cutoff automated, and you can choose different parameters. I've got cutoff and intensity, and then the delay, I've got the wet automated. So just to bring in the delay really toward the end of that intro part of the sample. So you can again choose whichever parameters of the effects that you'd like to automate. And then from there, I did automate the volume, as you can see, just to even out the sound. And from there, my song really begins. And this other track, and I'm clicking A again on my keyboard to take away the view of the automation. This is still a MIDI track down here. This is part of the vocal sample that I've used in the arrangement when the actual beat starts to come in. So let's listen to that intro and then with the beat coming in. So let's break this down a little bit. As you can see, I've only used part of the sample, of the vocal sample here, and I do have a different effect on this track. This is the Valhalla Supermassive. I've used a preset that's actually a reverb for a synth, and beyond that are my chords, which this is just a plugin for various keyboard sounds. There's a bunch of Rhodes sounds and Wurlitzers and electronic pianos called Lounge Lizard, and by itself it really doesn't sound like much, but what I've done, as you can see, I've got a couple buses going on. This is a bus that just has some reverb, and this other bus is sort of my main effects bus that goes to this guitar rig. This is a Native Instruments plugin that is really fun to mess around with. There's all kinds of amps that you can play with to give you different effects. Let's just listen to what that particular track sounds like without the effects here. So you can see it doesn't really sound like much. When I add the effects, so it really adds a lot, and it's really important to keep that ambient feel in this type of beat. And so really that's what this guitar rig accomplishes. And then as far as the actual chords, if we look in the MIDI region, I've got fairly complex chords going on here. The melody of that sample, if we just play it on our keyboard, just to give you a reference again, this is what it sounds like by itself. We can see we've got an E, A, C sharp, and a B. Now you could do different things with that sample. What I've chosen is to start with an F sharp minor, because we've got, in terms of the F sharp minor, we've got our minor third, 5, and the minor 7. So right there, that first chord really sounds nice because we've added that minor 7, so it's not just a simple triad. And then from there, got kind of a passing note. You can see both on the piano roll, the E here, and I'll show you on the piano. The E is sort of a passing chord to my next chord, which is a D. And on the D, I'm playing this E here, which is the 2, But later on in the chords here, you can see how I've created some variation and made it a little bit more complex. The last chord I'm playing is also a D, and I'm adding that E on top, plus I've got the major 7, which is a C sharp. So this just really makes the chord sound really full and lush, and it gives variation from when I play that D chord elsewhere in the progression. So that's just an overview of the chords. And then my drums are, you know, I want to create that trap feel that is a nice contrast to the more ambient sounds that are in that keyboard progression and the vocal sounds. So I've got kind of a hard-hitting snare here, and I've got hi-hats with a little bit of trills going on, and then those are just samples that I started with. And then I have the drum kit designer here, which is really great for creating patterns, and I've put in a kick and a snare in there, and then I've got my 808 as well that I've created just in a MIDI region. So that's really all of the elements so far in this beat that really give it that trap soul feel. And as you can see, we started with this vocal sample that just gave us a great foundation for creating the kind of beat that we wanted to create. So that's what's great about Splice, is these kind of samples are just so easy to search for and then drag right in and manipulate and create whatever is to your liking. That kind of gives you a synopsis of how I worked on this beat, how I used Splice to find something that would work for the type of beat I was looking to create, how I manipulated that sample, and how I created the other elements that I wanted in the beat from there. I hope this was helpful to you. Please, again, subscribe to the channel if you did find this helpful. Hit that like button, leave a comment below if you have questions or requests for other tutorials, and stay tuned for more.